VTDigger. Thanks for venturing out on this snowy evening and joining us. My name is Gay Symington, and I came down from the eastern shore of Chittenden County earlier today. I'm president of the board of VTDigger, so I serve in a volunteer capacity, and I've chosen to focus my volunteer energies and charitable giving on VTDigger and its parent, the Vermont Journalism Trust, which you sometimes hear that they're interchangeable in a way. And I do that because, for me, a shared statewide source of fact-checked news is a critical piece of what it takes to have a civil society, civic society. And I feel like we need some of that these days. So, and VTDigger has a national reputation. It's a leader in nonprofit digital news. It's sort of a ray of hope for an industry that is really struggling as its revenue models kind of have disintegrated over the last couple decades. And we rely on charitable gifts from our readers who also value news and look at news as a public service. So again, thanks for being here. My job is only to introduce Skye, and then she will introduce Geeta and David and take the evening from there. Skye joined VTDigger just under 3 years ago, and she came to us with a long career in both the reporting and editorial side of journalism at the Free Press, at the Rutland Herald, at the Barry Montpelier Times-Argus, as well as on the technical business and publishing side at Vermont Life, The Nation, and Chalkbeat, which is one of the largest nonprofit news organizations in the country. We did a national search for our CEO, and we found her right in our backyard in Middlesex, Vermont. She also owned, edited, and published Vermont Sports, which is a magazine dedicated to outdoor sports and recreation. Vermont is well served to have Skye at the helm of VTDigger, and you will hear her speak about Geeta and all that she brings to Digger. And I just want to add that Geeta is at Digger because of Skye. And Skye never sort of shines a light on herself. We're very lucky to have her here. So thank you.
Hi, everybody. Thank you, Gay. That was a very lovely intro. It's really great to be back here at the Manchester Community Library. Many of you were here last year for our event with Jill Lepore, which was such a highlight. So we're thrilled to be back. And again, thank you for joining us on a snowy evening. And thank you for joining us and for believing that like we do, that strong local journalism is the foundation of a healthy democracy. And in Vermont, we care about democracy. I also want to acknowledge at the start that today is Veterans Day, and thank you to our veterans. Thank you for your sacrifice for the freedoms that we have. One of the freedoms that is so near and dear to us is the freedom of the press. And yes. This is a pivotal moment for the freedom of the press and for VTDigger. Because across the country, local newsrooms are disappearing, disinformation is spreading, and journalists are facing increasing attacks for simply doing their jobs. But here in Vermont, we are proving that rigorous, independent journalism can thrive when a community stands behind it, like you are doing tonight. So I'd love to see a show of hands. Who here is a regular VTDigger reader? Woohoo! All right, thank you. And who here maybe didn't know about Digger until this event? Oh my gosh, great crowd. Thank you. So I won't go into too much detail since you know us, but just sort of briefly, we are a nonprofit, nonpartisan digital newsroom. We have about 30 staff members. Most of them are journalists. And we have 8 fundraising operations revenue staff. We have the most incredible team. Many of them are here tonight. I want to give a shout out to Leslie Hill-Blount, our CRO. Where's Leslie? She's outside still. You maybe met her on her way in. Kevin O'Connor, who is a longtime reporter. He is a reporter based here in Southern Vermont. Glenn Russell, our photographer. Glenn and I worked together at the Free Press years ago. Thank you, Glenn. And then Dustin Byerly, who's our head of major giving. Libby Sparadeo, who's the director of our membership and engagement. Is Libby outside still? Libby. Okay, and Hannah Blair, who this is week 2 for her. Is she? There she is. There's Hannah in the back. So Dustin, Libby, and Hannah put so much work into tonight. I really want to pause and thank them for all that they've done to make this happen, so thank you. Over the past year, VTDigger has grown in reach and in ambition. In July, Harvard's Nieman Lab named us the 12th most read nonprofit news site in the country, and that is not on a per capita basis. And that is when compared to national, because Vermont, we're always per capita. This is straight up. This is compared to national news outlets like ProPublica. Today, we're announcing a partnership with PBS's Frontline, which is an award-winning investigative series. We're doing a year-long investigation into the extreme weather we've experienced and the federal government's shifting response. We've launched a poverty, wealth, and economic inequality beat, and a new environmental science beat in conjunction with the University of Vermont. At the heart of this momentum is our extraordinary new editor-in-chief, Geeta Anand. Geeta is a Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist and the former dean of UC Berkeley's Graduate School of Journalism. She's worked for the Wall Street Journal, the Boston Globe, and the New York Times, and she got her start right here in Vermont in Springfield and Rutland covering Springfield and Rutland for the Rutland Herald. She is deepening our investigative work. She's bringing into Digger other highly talented journalists and leading with courage, compassion, and a belief that local news has the power to have a direct impact, one that we can see right in front of us. And joining her tonight in conversation is David Goodman, a veteran Vermont journalist, best-selling author, and longtime host of the Vermont Conversation. David has spent decades in conversation with some of Vermont's and the country's biggest newsmakers. It's my absolute pleasure to introduce these 2 journalism luminaries for what will surely be an engaging Vermont conversation.
It works. Well, Geeta and everybody, welcome to the Vermont Conversation, the Manchester edition. It is really great to be down here in the tropics of Vermont. You know, in the course of doing a little, we reporters, we like to do our digging. And so in researching Geeta, I learned something that Skye seems to have overlooked in her job interview. I cannot believe this didn't come up. So we might as well blow your cover now, Geeta. Among the many impressive things you've heard about Geeta, one you did not hear is that she was once upon a time the national swimming champion of India. When I told Geeta in the car that I had found out her secret, she burst out laughing. But anyway, thank you for indulging that. So we are not going to talk about, tips and tricks that Geeta has used in the pool. But when I first learned that you were taking over as editor-in-chief of Vermont Digger, I was very excited about your history as a foreign correspondent and an investigative reporter. And then I was worried that maybe you misheard a key detail about the job. And did you realize that the job was not in Versailles or Vietnam, but in Vermont? And then I looked a little further and discovered that your roots in journalism are at the Rutland Herald. So maybe we could begin by just having you share a little of your journalism journey that started and is now wrapping back around to Vermont, much to our benefit.
I would love to. I'm from Mumbai in India, and I came to this part of the world to go to Dartmouth College. And I met my husband when I was at Dartmouth College, and he happens to be from Plymouth, Vermont. His parents ran the Salt Ash Inn in Plymouth. And so, I made my way over to his parents' house in Plymouth quite a few times when we were in college. But I didn't know when I was in college what I wanted to do when I graduated. I wasn't as focused as perhaps you were, David, or so many being focused. And so when I got out of college, I hadn't done internships at the New York Times or anywhere else. I'd done, a random array of things. And so my first job out of college actually was, I had a job even before the Rutland Herald, and it was at a free weekly shopper on Cape Cod covering the town of Barnstable. I was based in Hyannis. And I did that for a little less than a year and then came up to Vermont. And my husband, who's from Plymouth, was starting a business with his dad. And so I started looking around for jobs. And I showed up and interviewed with someone you may have read at the Rutland Herald, but Susan Small here. And Kevin knows Susan well. I also interviewed at the Claremont Eagle Times. And I didn't get the job at the Claremont Eagle Times. My whole interview focused on my accent. And the editor was like, "Do you think people will understand you?" And I was like, "Yes, I think they will." And he apparently thought not. But to my great delight, Susan did hire me. She later said she found the interview slightly irritating because she... she seemed a bit distracted and had a terrible cold, and she was like, "Okay, I'll call you back." And I said, and I'm definitely dating myself here, I said, "Oh, do you think I can put my number in your Rolodex?" Because she had this giant Rolodex on her desk. And so, I put my number in her Rolodex, and she called me back, and, I was hired to be a reporter in the Springfield Bureau, covering Springfield and Windsor and West Windsor, vying really hard to get to the Rutland Bureau main office, which eventually I did. And I covered the city of Rutland, and Kevin O'Connor, who's here, covered Rutland schools at that time, and we were in the same office together, and that was a lot of fun. I then went to work at the Boston Globe, and I was at the Boston Globe for 4 years or so. And I really wanted to be a political reporter. And I eventually covered Boston city politics, and I also covered the State House for the Boston Globe. But my husband and I were balancing our careers all through these decades, and he wanted to take a job in Connecticut. And that was outside of the Boston Globe's sphere of influence. And so I ended up getting a job at the Wall Street Journal then. I hadn't considered myself a business reporter, and I was confessing to Kevin as we stood outside that I never did an earnings story during my 17 years at the Wall Street Journal. I wrote about people, the people running the companies. But I was I then joined the Wall Street Journal, and I actually spent 17 years at the Wall Street Journal, including the last 7 or 8 years covering India as a foreign correspondent for the Wall Street Journal. I thought it was a really clever trick to be covering a foreign correspondent covering the country that you're from. But I'd never wanted to be someone who actually didn't know about the subject she was covering. So it benefited me greatly, I thought, to actually have been from India and to have majored in history and studied Indian history at Dartmouth. what was really fun about being in India as a foreign correspondent, in addition to the journalism, was taking my two kids, who were then 8 and 10, plucking them out of the New York City public schools and moving them to India, kicking and screaming, "We're American!" They hate it when I repeat that story, but now, of course, they think they're Indian, because we spent 10 years then in Mumbai, and so they truly are bicultural, and I thought that was a wonderful gift to give them. And then I sort of felt like it was time to teach, to edit, to give back. And I had an opportunity to teach at UC Berkeley. And I went to Berkeley to teach one class in 2018. Funnily enough, it was a class on, and only Berkeley would have these classes. It was an India journalism class at the journalism school. And when someone mentioned it to me, I thought, I was in Mumbai, so I thought, yeah, of course, what a great idea, and I thought the students would come to India to take the class. But no, I had to go to Berkeley to teach this class. And one thing led to another, and I ended up becoming a professor at the journalism school and then dean of the journalism school. And it was fun and wonderful, but we were far away from Vermont, far away from our family, all of whom live on the East Coast. And so when Sky called me in March of this year and told me about the editor-in-chief position, I was just reminded of, a conversation that I had with a very good friend of mine as we were leaving the Rutland Herald. And actually, he had called me before Sky, and he had said, remember when we were leaving, we always said we would come back to Vermont. And I did remember it. And I always had hoped we would be able to come back to Vermont. And, just talking to Sky about VTDigger, and what VTDigger does and what it represents to Vermont and the incredible journalism that it produces was a huge draw. And I've always believed, I will talk about this, but I've always believed, I saw and I lived and I walked the impact of local news when I was a Rutland Herald reporter. And we'll talk about this, but I never had a story that had more impact than stories I did for the Rutland Herald. And
well, let's talk about one in particular, because I realized when you were describing it to me, both I and possibly many people in this room have reaped the benefits of a story that began in the humble little Rutland Herald and then became a national story, which I think speaks to a lot of what is the subtext of our conversation, which is the importance of trickle-up journalism, the importance of local journalism that leverages and informs national change. So tell us about the Rutland Herald story that went big.
I would love to. So, and Kevin will remember this reporter. So Nancy Wright, who was a reporter for the Rutland Herald, was in the town clerk's office in Norwich when she saw the town clerk in a frenzy. The town clerk's name was Karen Porter. And she was getting all of these calls from people whose credit cards were canceled. And they were canceled. These were residents of Norwich, Vermont. And they were canceled because their credit suddenly looked really bad. And their credit, when they called up this company that does credit reports, TRW thought that they had been delinquent in their taxes. And so Nancy told me, there's something going on. I was the Norwich reporter. There's something going on in your town. So I drove up to Norwich and started trying to find out what was happening. I had never heard of a credit report. I was like 24 years old, and I'd never heard of TRW Credit Reporting Company, which is one of the largest credit reporting companies in the country. And it turned out that TRW had sent people around to every town to pick up their property taxpayer list, and their delinquent taxpayer list, and fed all of this information into giant computers to keep track of how we're doing in our credit. And TRW had picked up the list of delinquent taxpayers and thought that was the list, no, picked up the list of taxpayers and listed every single person as being delinquent in their taxes. And they did this not only in Norwich, but in many other towns around Vermont. So I started writing about it. And then a Wall Street Journal reporter was cycling through Vermont and picked up a copy of the Rutland Herald and saw it. And he started calling me, asking for information about it, and he did several huge front page stories about it. Pretty soon, Congress was having hearings on the topic. Pretty soon, the town clerk, Karen Porter, was in Washington, D.C. She was testifying, and pretty soon, Congress had passed a new law requiring credit reporting companies to fix mistakes rapidly when they're pointed out, and also to give everyone a free copy of their credit report every year so that they can check whether there's any mistakes on it.
And
And little did I know that I would go on to, the Boston Globe, the Wall Street Journal, the New York Times, and never would I have a story that would change a law in a country as I did at the Rutland Herald.
well, it strikes me that you are coming full circle in landing at VTDigger, because this style of trickle-up journalism we've already seen. VTDigger was born, I think, in 2009, so it hasn't been around that long. But in its relatively short life, it broke the story in 2014 of the EB-5 scandal at Jay Peak in Vermont, the largest financial fraud in the history of the state of Vermont, which has also gone on to be the subject of numerous national news coverage. In 2020, VTDigger did a special report on Slate Ridge, a militia training camp that was terrorizing neighbors in its community, and was an extraordinarily difficult story for VTDigger to do because, as you may guess, the reporter was putting herself at great risk to cover a subject with a history of violence and a history of threatening people who crossed him. Talk about the power of trickle-up journalism, both as you've practiced it, but as you are now at VTDigger, why it matters to have local news.
I mean, we really are telling people what's happening in their towns and cities around the country. So if we aren't there writing these stories, like no one knows that EB-5 is happening, no one knows Slate Ridge is happening. Our coverage right now of immigrants getting picked up and, spirited off to other parts of the country. That's the way the world finds out that these things are happening. Our stories get picked up by national media. The national media hold our national leaders accountable. So we matter to you, like we matter to here in Vermont, but we're also like a key part of the web of national and international news. And so if we aren't vibrant, if we're not there at the city council meeting or at the school board meeting and telling those stories, government isn't held accountable. It's almost like these things haven't happened if we're not there hearing and sharing what we're hearing in as accurate and fair a way as we can.
I think one of the things that probably has the attention of many of us here is just what is happening in the world of local news. Every week, 2 local newspapers closes somewhere in the country. The number of local news desert counties, that is, counties with one or no sources of information, has hit a record high, and now some 50 million Americans have limited to no access to local news. And now we see, with the loss of funding to NPR, this is going to multiply in, manyfold. Probably not in Vermont, but in Vermont Public will find a way. We certainly are cheering hard for our colleagues there. But in other parts of the country, rural areas where that radio station may be the only thing they have, it is going to go dark. And on the other side of the ledger, there have been more than 300 local news startups in the past 5 years in every other state. And I'm very proud to say VTDigger was one of the first. This thing that you read, this curious online-only thing, actually is a national model and is often hailed as that. There are new ones popping up. New Hampshire has one now, but it really began here. What do you see going on with local news and the future of local news, and how news has to evolve in the way we deliver it in order to stay relevant and viable?
I mean, you all know local news matters, because how else do we know what's happening in our communities? It's also the place where people on all sides of the political spectrum can agree that journalism is real and that reporters are well-meaning individuals actually trying to find out what's happening. So, and this is because if people actually know the reporter who's covering their community, if they have actually gone to the same city council meeting and they see a story and they say, yeah, I actually said that thing, it's very hard for them to be dismissed as fake news if people have actually know them and actually see and read the coverage and know that it's true about their communities. And with advertising going to social media, local news organizations and companies like the Rutland Herald, the Burlington Free Press, and so many others have really been gutted. And this has happened across the country. The good news, though, is that people have invented new models. And Anne Galloway invented such a model when she created VTDigger. I think you said it was 2009. She was someone, as you all probably know, who was laid off from the Rutland Herald because it fell on hard times. And she walked out the door and a few days later created this online publication. And then as the Rutland Herald shrunk and laid off more and more people, including Kevin O'Connor, they joined VTDigger, and VTDigger sort of rose to become, a vibrant, really important news organization. And how did it do that? It was fully online, and at the time Anne started it, apparently that was considered just, even then, in 2009, an odd idea. But she didn't have all the printing costs. And then she came up with this new model, which has become, a model for everyone else. And, there are a few hundred such publications around the country. And so her idea was, and the idea of organizations like VTDigger is, you don't have a paywall, so you don't have accurate news behind a paywall and fake news or, misinformation free. That's really important. But then how do you fund it? It can't be funded solely by advertising because there's so little money in advertising right now. So it's through gifts, through people in a community believing that just like contributing to a library or the ballet matters, like contributing to supporting information, fair, accurate information, matters enough to actually support it. And that's a huge part of how VTDigger is funded. And the other important source of news, which I hope will expand in this country, but is moving in the opposite direction for sure, is government supporting free, accurate information. I mean, this country's moving in the opposite direction, but I think we need a combination of ways of supporting local news like this, including advertising, including gifts and reader support, but perhaps also eventually some government support. It shouldn't just be any one of them. It's too challenging and too big a goal.
The tagline of VTDigger is news in pursuit of truth, which At once upon a time, I would have thought that was a very uncontroversial statement. But it's controversial now. People have different truths. People's sources of information is highly siloed. And as we all click around online, algorithms are, in the blink of an eye, calculating what will catch our eyes, what will make us click, and we all go flying down rabbit holes that miraculously just keep opening up all around us all the time, and we can go deeper and deeper into our own world. So how do you and how do the journalists of VTDigger push back against the skepticism that there even is a truth?
That's such a good question and such a challenge. By the time I went to the journalism school at Berkeley to teach, I'd been a journalist for 27 years. And so, I never questioned that I was in pursuit of truth. But when I encountered our students in our master's degree program, they were largely in their 20s. They were mostly to the left, as you would imagine, but they spanned the political spectrum. And on both sides, they were very skeptical that there was a truth, or even that facts existed. And that was terrifying to me. And I'm generalizing, not every student, but like a good segment of them. Like we had to spend like the first few months in conversation and persuading them that there was such a thing as facts and that truth existed. So I think it's really problematic that we're so polarized and that large groups of people are just absorbing a completely different set of facts that they consider facts, and that we've lost faith in facts existing. And I'm exaggerating here, but that a good number of people have lost faith. And I think places like we need to revive local news, because I think that's where rebuilding confidence in facts and truth starts. Because if you've actually gone to a meeting and seen a story based on it and met the reporter, and it's actually seems the article actually matches what you heard, then you begin to disbelieve the discrediting of journalism that is happening, led by the leaders of our country, which is having a devastating effect on our democracy. Because how are we to decide what to do if we don't, should we support this bond issue, or should we go to war in Iraq, if we don't have a shared set of facts to even begin to have a debate around?
I'm curious what you see. We're having this conversation against the backdrop of a national kind of a level of extreme polarization. How does that trickle down into the work that we're doing here, or you could even broaden it to say the work that you've done as a journalist at other times? Is it making it harder? Are reporters encountering hostility and resistance, even at the local level, which, is, and I often think about, the coarseness of language now. I mean, that starts at the top. When our national political figures, and yes, Donald Trump, we might as well name the elephant in the room, are speaking about their opponents in the ways that they are, it's very hard to control it further down the line. In our town, our town hall meetings, in our, it's amazing how it percolates the entire fabric of society. What are you seeing at the local level?
It's making it much harder to report a story, because people are, when you approach someone saying you're a reporter, people aren't as trusting as they used to be. They are more skeptical. I remember our students in covering protests in Berkeley. Like I don't remember ever having encountered people who's, are in a protest and you're taking their picture and they're furious and trying to grab your camera and saying, you have no right to take my picture. Usually if people were in a public space, they, understood that journalists would take their pictures and quote them. So I think, our journalists are encountering an antagonistic public or a more antagonistic public. Not everyone and not always, but it's just harder to do the very important work of gathering the facts, of interviewing all of you and people on all sides of an issue when people are skeptical of your intentions and of your commitment to the pursuit of truth.
What are you most concerned about now as you look out on the world of journalism, but just the world generally? Because you are somebody with a global perspective beyond what most people would have. And you've also seen things that, working in India where conspiracies and lies were perpetuated by the government, echoed in the media, resulting in, there were massacres at one time and sectarian violence. I mean, you've seen how wild this thing can get. So I'm just wondering, what are you most concerned about?
What a wide-ranging question, David. I'm going to go local, and I'm going to say, one of the things I've loved, and I loved this about teaching journalism, but I also really love it about Digger's newsroom, is that the reporters and the editors are so smart, they're so passionate, they're so collegial. They really support each other. We have every Thursday we have our newsroom meeting, and we begin with kudos, where people can talk about each other's stories. And it goes on and on and on and on as people talk about, this one story that was excellent. Like they're talking about one another's work and they're supporting it. And I love that. And they're ambitious and their story ideas are fantastic. And my job is to help support them and help elevate the work and help them make it the best it can be. So what am I worried about? I'm just worried about continuing to be able to do it. With the attacks on the media and also with so many funding cuts for so many organizations, including public media, but also like food banks. So here we are, and we're donor supported and audience supported, and now we're in a scarcity atmosphere competing with the food bank for support. And I just worry about being able to keep supporting this vibrant, passionate newsroom in the way it wants to be supported in these times.
Your last job was as Dean of the Journalism School at UC Berkeley. Vermont does not have a journalism school. UVM does not even have a journalism major. But Vermont does have one of the most productive journalism training programs in the region, and that is VTDigger. And I know this because my son came through it as one of the paid interns in VTDigger. He is now a reporter in Washington, and it really has set him on his life's path. And I know that many people his age also came through Digger, got really top-notch editing, and he was immediately sent out to cover the Black Lives Matter protests all around Vermont. And he was, 19 years old at the time, and in the middle of all these rallies, interviewing people. So I often feel like this is an unsung side of the place, but you're back leading a journalism school in a way. Do you think of it that way?
Yes and no. I like that we're actually, I love this about being a journalist. I didn't love submitting, being in college and submitting papers that were just going to be read by this one professor. I loved the impact of the work. So it feels great to be like actually producing journalism, as different from, being in a journalism school. But I feel like the culture is similar to the culture of VTDigger is similar to the culture of the journalism school where I was dean, because you have people who, are demanding that you do good by them. Like we want to learn, we want to develop. We need you to bring great journalists here to tell us how to do it. We need the support. We need your attention. We need the editor's attention. We need you to be in conversation with us every day, all of the editors on our stories. You must support us learning. And so, and I love being engaged in those conversations. I loved our students' questions. Some of my professor colleagues, didn't like being challenged. I think to succeed as a professor at Berkeley, but also to be the editor-in-chief of this newsroom, you have to be comfortable being challenged to do better always, and to think differently. And because, we have a lot to offer, we who have decades of experience, but we need to be challenged by people thinking differently, using new technology differently. And it's in those conversations that we get better and can evolve. So I think, yes, it feels similar, but it's also producing real work, which is a joy.
You've had so many different interesting chapters of your career, starting at the Rutland Herald, although now I know it really started in Cape Cod, and then continuing as an international reporter, an investigative reporter, a professor, and now you're back as the editor of a statewide news service. What do you feel like is your mission now in this chapter of your work life?
I think it's very much in service of the reporters and the journalism. I feel like I learned a lot and as a reporter and got to develop to my fullest potential, which I really wanted to do, to learn to do investigative stories and revelatory, counterintuitive stories, write about corruption, reveal things people didn't want revealed. But there came a point where I felt like it was a time to give back and to support the next generation in doing this work and these stories. And I just love journalism, and it's so much fun talking to the reporters about the pieces they're doing and who they should talk to and how they should get this person to talk to them and who we can partner with so their piece can be in VTDigger, but also on Frontline or, where else. So it feels like a fun, important, meaningful challenge to be in a place where I can support other people doing the work and in Vermont, where all of you are so engaged. I loved being a reporter here. And it's so, to produce meaningful journalism where the audience is actually responding to it. For example, we were writing about all the detainees being brought through Burlington Airport and these activists interrupting ICE as it made its way through. And, then there was a airport hearing and all of these people who read our stories were at the hearing, and pretty soon ICE was not bringing people through Burlington Airport anymore. We write about the things that you're doing, and then they have an impact, and then we write about them again. It feels meaningful to be engaged in a dialogue with a community of people, as Vermont is, who care, who are responding, and then if you screw up and make a mistake, who are holding you accountable, as you should be, for those mistakes.
Well, why don't we turn it over to our audience, because I suspect this is a crowd of Vermonters, which means I know you are full of questions and you're well informed. So we start with Ed over there. I want to just say, Ed is something of a legend. He is the former owner of the Northshire Bookstore of Manchester, which is one of Vermont's oldest, best, and greatest independent bookstores, still going strong, though he is past the torch.
And apparently Stephen King has been there.
I'll just talk loud.
Okay.
You left out the best half of the founding of the bookstore, which is sitting right beside me.
Oh.
I had some experience decades ago in journalism and was brought up in a journalistic family. And I always remember the newsrooms where AP and UP and the telex was there, and you were listening for a number of bells, and this was all just part of the culture, the sharing and the sourcing. To what degree is an analogous sourcing going on? Do other news organizations seek out your stories? Are you paid for them? Can you tell us about the culture that's developing around analogous to that?
I love thinking about those days, you know, when the newsroom was so vibrant and people were abuzz and dashing around, sharing what was happening and their stories, and the editor was looking over their shoulder, or they were looking over their editor's shoulder as their story was being edited. And one of the challenges of the COVID era has been, you know, for people to sort of return to their houses. And it's a challenge drawing people back into the newsroom. But people do want it, particularly the younger reporters. Every time we have an event in the newsroom, most of them come in eager to be eager to have a community and to be sitting beside you as you edit their story, because there's something that you learn just from, I mean, I learn, and I'm sure Kevin will remember this, I learned so much by being in the Springfield Bureau of the Rutland Herald and hearing Susan Small here interviewing people. You know, journalism is an apprenticeship. You hear how someone else does something and you model yourself after that. I learned from her that, like, you need to make yourself like the most entertaining person that head of the planning commission will talk to that day. Like, you know, she just laughed and she was so funny, and you know, she had these lengthy conversations in the basement of this building in downtown Springfield. That was the office. And then our stories, to your point, used to get picked up, you know, by AP and sent through the AP around the world. Our stories do get regularly picked up now, but it's not always AP, though sometimes it is. I know Greta Solsa did a story recently on nursing homes and like the sale of nursing homes to like a questionable owner and some of the unpleasant things happening in these nursing homes. And AP picked it up, but also Apple News picks up our stories.
You get paid for it?
I'll have to ask Sky about whether we get paid for them. No, Sky is not saying no, we don't get paid for it. So so we don't get paid for any of this, Sky? Okay.
No, when we make our news available to, we have 13 community news organizations around the state, and we make our news, and they can republish any of our work for free. That's our way of supporting the ecosystem in Vermont, and some of them, they don't have to, but some of them allow us to reprint their news. So, you know, it helps to surface issues that are happening in smaller communities so they get in front of our statewide audience and, you know, the people in Power and Montpelier and vice versa. So that's all free right now. It's smaller organizations. We're actually working with Tuck to evaluate that program and see what's sort of next for it. Should we grow? Is there another tier of news organizations that could afford to pay for that coverage? I like that you're nodding. I think so too. And another partnership we just started is with Notice, News of the United States. They're a DC-based newsroom through the Albritton Institute, and we've partnered with the Maine Monitor. They have a DC-based reporter focused on the Vermont and Maine congressional delegations. and the federal agencies that have big impact in Vermont. So we're publishing their work, and then we're also doing one of our reporters is working on a long feature-length story with one of their editors. So there's a lot of sharing in a way that, when I was getting my start in my career, it was the AP or the UP, but never, intra newsrooms.
Well, another interesting collaboration and partnership is with our housing reporter, Carly Berlin. Talk about that partnership with Vermont Public and VTDigger.
So Carly Berlin covers housing for VTDigger and Vermont Public. So we share her. And for poor Carly, this is somewhat challenging. For 2 weeks, she's edited by an editor at VTDigger, and the next 2 weeks, an editor at Vermont Public. But we manage this quite well. And she's actually funded in part by Report for America, which is this organization. It's a nonprofit, I think, also, and it sends reporters to local news organizations and helps pay for them. We pay a portion of her salary, and then Report for America pays a portion of it. And then it really helps us because Report for America, say, pays half, my guess is. Sky is nodding, so yes. And then the other half, we pay, I'm guessing we pay a quarter of, and we share with VTDigger. So there are these partnerships that help us expand our reach, which is really helpful. And she's done some amazing reporting on housing in Vermont. Recently, she did an investigative report with our data reporter and looked at all the money that came into housing during the COVID years and how much housing did it actually build. And what I loved, and I love this about VTDigger and all responsible journalism, is, it wasn't like, oh, the money was wasted, or, oh, we saved all the homeless people. Life is always grayer than that and more complex, and it was that complex story. Like, okay, there were certain, I forget how many, so many units were built. It was less than hoped because during COVID, prices went so high, so it was fewer units, but it held government accountable to what happened with that money. Oh, you remember it? Okay, yeah. Okay, thanks.
Back there.
Lee Fox, my question is, I want to delve further into nonpartisanism. Ms. Anand, you talked about this was one of your ambitions. I hope it's one of everyone's ambitions. How does the editorial staff help to foster that? How do they know when they see it? And are there models that you're producing that are reproducible outside of your organization?
That is such an excellent question. I think it's really hard. And I think that's one of the ways we've evolved in our thinking as journalists since when I started. When I started, we just assumed, we knew we were supposed to be unbiased, and we assumed we could be. I think now we think, the way I think about it, and this is influenced in a large part by my students, my former students, we think we come into things with our own biases based on our lived experiences, But our goal is to try and understand that this is my bias and then to set it aside and then try to approach the story with an open mind and really intentionally not just talk to the people we agree with or who look like us, but really try to talk to everyone, not just two sides, but on all sides of an issue. And this was challenging for me to convince our students of at Berkeley, because they were like, I'm for tenant rights, I'm not talking to the landlord. And I was like, the only way to explain it to them was to say, how if they didn't do that, how they could actually get a story completely wrong. That if you aren't really coming into a story with an open mind, that you will make huge mistakes and it will be the wrong story. So it is a challenge in journalism, my opinion is, because the person who usually becomes a journalist is usually more liberal or left-leaning in their thinking. that is just what we see. And so the challenge is to persuade all of us that to be humble, that we don't know everything, and not to just make assumptions that your point of view is the right point of view, or that that's where a story should land up. So it takes effort and thought, and I don't know that we figured out the full answer yet of how to get there. But I think part of the answer is just frequent examinations of our own bias in stories, and taking seriously the people who tell us we're biased, like not dismissing them and thinking we have all the answers, but taking very seriously and respond, and like having deep conversations with those people who think we're biased, because it's in really listening that we can be aware of it and be fairer.
How are we doing on time, Dustin? Are we?
15, 20 minutes.
Okay. Other questions?
15, 17.
Rosalie?
Thank you. Welcome.
Thank you.
This is wonderful to have you here. And per usual, David, your questions are on spot and great conversation. I'm going to try to frame my question as succinctly as possible. And I think about reporting. I've not been a reporter, but I've done writing, but not reporting. And I think of an editor as someone who sees that the T's are crossed and the I is dotted and your facts are correct and your sentences are structured properly. And I want to know where Vermont Digger is with the name Digger, to dig down deeper, where Vermont Digger is and intends to go in terms of just reporting what you see, hopefully in an unbiased way, and recounting what you see versus investigative reporting. Because every so often I come across a story and I'll say, well, they should ask this next. And here's an uncovered fact that I just need to know. And of course, we don't often loop back to that story. And I know that Digger has done that. But I want to know where you're taking the publication, we'll call Digger a publication, in terms of much more of a, why is this happening? Just digging deeper and deeper rather than just the recounting of what's happening. And I know you do both, but is it going to be more investigative work?
That's such a good question, and the reporters want to know exactly that answer too. And this is a very unsatisfactory response, so I apologize for it. And you answered it too. Like, we want to do both. Like, if something really important is happening, we need to tell you about it, like, now, as fast as possible. But we also want to give our reporters time to dig deeper. And so we're trying to do that by planning better. So reporters' frustration was they didn't get to do this enough. And they didn't because we were always sending them to the next story. So they're, for better or for worse, they have me, who always wanted to dig deeper, as the editor-in-chief. And I'm not pressing them to do more stories. I don't want them to miss, like, the most important stories, but I don't care if they do less or if they take an extra day to dig deeper, because I think that it's well spent for the story to have, like, the context to be, like, really written in an interesting way, to have, really talk to a few more people who really know what's happening. So we want, and our reporters want to dig. Like, they're there because they want to investigate. So it's a balance. It's a balance. Like, we can't have everyone on an investigation and no one available, when J.D. Vance comes to Vermont, to be there, or to go stand outside Burlington Airport and tell us what's happening with ICE. Like, it's a mix. But that balance, it's a constant conversation. And no one's ever satisfied that the balance is right. But my leaning, I know news is important and it's important to move quickly, but I've always wanted to take the extra day. So that's my bias, dig deeper. I want to tell you something you don't know.
Hey, Kathleen James, Manchester. I've been trying to figure out how to frame this.
Hold on, Kathleen. I should just explain. Kathleen is the state representative from here and a longtime community person here.
Yeah, thanks, David. I feel like I spend so much of my time combating misinformation in the public policy sphere. It's depressing and it's really scary. And I place so much hope in, nonpartisan, fact-based journalism, but I find that we're competing for eyeballs and literally for a voice in this howling cesspool that is the internet. So what can you guys do? What are you doing to try to elevate your links above the junk website that somebody put up yesterday that's peddling a bunch of bullshit? How do you win?
I mean, this is just such a good question, and I mean, it's so frustrating. And I think you win in different ways. I mean, I hope you win, but this is how we're fighting, but we're fighting by being smart about Google Analytics and how you get the attention of an audience on the internet. So we have some great people at Digger who are focused on that. Like, how do you frame a headline? How do you frame the excerpt for the story? How do you get eyeballs on your story? You can't do what I focused on for most of my journalism career, which is just focus on telling the best story possible. That is not enough, sadly. And then you also focus on the great journalism. And the good news about our audience at Digger is it actually values substance. So it's wonderful to be in Vermont and to have an audience like Digger, because you don't have annoying editors then going on about clickbait stories, because our audience actually reads the longest, densest policy story because they really want to know as much as possible about that topic. But the third thing is, you also really embrace being entertaining. So you compete with the TikToks. We aren't doing that yet, but I hope we'll be able to compete with the TikToks and the vertical videos and be truly visual so we can engage sort of a younger audience too in our work. And I said this at the journalism school, and I truly believe it, even though I can't practice it because I'm not a video maker or a TikTok maker, but I don't care. We need to be where our audience is. We can't be you should read because we read. No, younger audiences want their news fast. We can give it to them as long as the stories are based on facts and people know how, the journalist knows how to confirm facts and investigate. Then let's be entertaining. Let's learn from the entertainers and that way try and compete. And again, it's a fight, but I think we have to meet our audience where it is, still produce meaningful journalism, and just fight, be free. It's important that we don't have a paywall. Yeah.
I also think a lot of the way that journalism gets out is through you all. It's through sharing on social media. And so the more that you're pushing out good reporting, stuff by VTDigger, other places that you trust, you're amplifying it in a way that money can't buy. You're a trusted source. Each of you is a trusted source to someone in your community. And we know that the algorithms of social media are such that when things are shared, reclicked, and in whatever way, it amplifies it in a way that one news outlet can't do alone.
Hi, my name is Ron Pulser from Rutland Town, and you are talking about covering stories from all sides. I was wondering if you've ever heard of ground news and what your rating is in ground news?
I don't know what our rating is, but pray tell.
Okay, well, I just thought of it while you were talking. I found out about it through listening to Michael Smirkanish show on XM Radio. But it says, it's good news, it says VTDigger's aggregated media bias check is center. So they have like a negative scale is far left and a positive is far right. So you're kind of like around, I guess, the zero or the center, which means you're covering it from all sides. So it says you get a center from Ad Fontes Media, lean left rating from Media Bias / Fact Check, and a center rating from all sides. It says if you want to know if VTDigger is credible or reliable, look no further. We rank VTDigger as a very high factuality. Find out more about our methodology. So.
Wow, thank you.
It's the first time that being told that we rate a 0 is a high compliment. Other questions or comments?
And then we have one up here after that. Yeah.
It's just very quick, and I'm
sorry.
right here.
Okay.
Are we passing on to the quick question? Are you on Instagram? That was all. Just
Yes, yes, yes. We are on Instagram. Yeah.
okay. 'Cause
And we're trying, moving in more and more visual direction. But yes.
Thanks for that.
Good question.
Well, that's good to know. My name's Jane Hollander. I'm a resident here in Manchester. This is a bit of a self-interested question because I'm not sure how much it applies to the rest of the room. But what advice would you give to aspiring journalists?
Wonderful question. I have a daughter who's 25 and is an aspiring journalist too. I think I would give the same advice. I mean, I wish it feels. I mean, I would suggest I just think just do it. The advice is what I'm sort of I'm thinking of the path that I traveled, and so I have a little bit of humility that times have changed and it's a different world. And with all of those caveats, I mean, all through my life and career, people have said journalism's dead. The internet's arrived, newspapers are dead. AI's arrived, newspapers are dead. And I just think that it's just such an interesting and impactful career. And I still see jobs and opportunities in journalism. So I think just start out freelance or get a job at a small local paper. The caveat is, of course, I did that. So, we all think the path we trod is the path. But I just feel like you get to be at the place everyone wishes they could be, covering the thing everyone is interested in, but they can't be there because they have their other jobs. So you're there, and that's how you're spending your time. You get to talk to the most interesting people. Everyone else, it's really hard for them to get a conversation with this person, but you're the reporter, so you get to be there and ask the questions. And you also get to experience life so fully. There's something about listening to someone talk about, what it's like to be the town clerk in Norwich, getting calls from people who think that, who are angry that you said they were delinquent in their taxes, or write about what it's like to be a prostitute or a selectman accused of molesting his child, or all these questions that are unimaginable. But you get to understand them more deeply because you're listening to the people who are struggling with them. So I think it's such a meaningful career, and there's still so many opportunities because local news organizations are going out of business, but there are new ones popping up like VTDigger or the 19th or ProPublica. There's so much innovation going on in journalism. Maybe you don't do text journalism. Maybe you do a TikTok or, join a place that does just video. There's innovation. And so many opportunities. And then it's so frustrating if you think that all of this is happening to me, climate change and, you know, Donald Trump. Like, if you're in journalism, you get to actually ask questions and follow like a story about something that you feel matters. So I think it's a way of having hope.
Hi, Leslie Addison. I live in North Bennington, and I wanted to just publicly thank the Digger because you guys were there when our community was devastated with the PFOA contamination. And when a community is harmed and there is voice that's brought forward that's truthful and passionate, it really makes a difference to the people that are impacted. So I just wanted to thank you for that.
Oh, thank you so much.
I was wondering what you thought the future of journalism contains with artificial intelligence. Is that an area that you feel is going to impact the industry in some way, or will the tradition of reporters going out and covering news still survive in an AI-dominated environment?
Such an important question. So I think, and we thought about this a lot at the journalism school too, because the question was like, should you punish your students and fail them if they use AI to write a story? Or should you teach them how to use it and deploy it in writing a story? And this is an unsatisfactory answer. So it just, like, I think our, like, I'll start with the journalism school. Like, I think our students need to learn to actually write their own story, because you can't just tell like a device to write a story, because there's judgment involved. Like, who do you believe who you interviewed? Who do you think is most important? Like, whose quote? Like, where's your story headed? There's so much judgment involved in writing a story. And it's also a craft, right? Like, how you decide to tell the story depends on what you think about the topic as you try to be fair and open-minded. That said, there's some things that maybe AI could gather the facts on and produce a few paragraphs on. So in our introductory courses, we just did not allow students to use AI. And then in other classes, we said it depended on what the professor decided the rules were, but that no one should use it without saying they were using it. Otherwise, they were failed. And so then, like, let's think about VTDigger. I mean, I think there may be a way to use AI to, and I think there already are ways to use AI to cover a bunch of meetings. I think we would then want to like have a reporter listen to what happened at those 5 meetings and maybe then write a story about like, hey, towns across Vermont are firing their town constables because they're harassing people, whatever. You know, like we would identify trends. Like there might be a way of harnessing, I know there's a way of harnessing AI to expand our reach. You know, we haven't figured that out yet. But I don't think AI will ever replace an actual reporter figuring out how to tell an important story. But it can be, it's a very important tool. And we need to figure out how to use it best, but at our service and not be in service of it. Because we know of all the mistakes it can make. And our stories aren't really just regurgitating of what happened. They're an interpretation and require judgment and understanding and context and history and all of those things.
We have time for one more question. Yes, back there.
Sue Berg from Newfane. So then, do you use fact checkers?
No, we check our own stories. Magazines have often had fact checkers, but all of the publications I've been at all my life, and VTDigger included, a reporter's in charge of checking all of their facts, the spellings of all of the names, making sure they got the name exactly right of the supervisory union, making sure they're quoting people correctly, listening again to the recording. It's a challenging job, and it's even more challenging today. Our reporters have recently struggled when they're listening to a Zoom meeting of say the city council, and someone speaks off camera. Like it's been challenging. They think it's a certain person, and once in a while it's someone else. So we need to be, have better practices of circling back to double check who it was and all of those things. So fact checking remains vitally important. It's something we could do better on. It's always been important. And reporters are best positioned to do it themselves. But with digital media, when you're pushing them to get the story up so fast, it's finding the balance between making sure you've dotted every I and getting the story out fast.
Well, Geeta, I want to thank you for participating in this Vermont conversation, and everybody here with enriching it with all your questions. So thanks so much.
And thank you, David.
I want to make a very quick pitch. We would love to have a video first reporter. We actually have a grant application right now through Report for America, which would cover half. However, we are a lean organization. So, if that were to come to fruition, we, don't know if we could pull it off. So, that's where we're at, right? We know we have one education reporter. We really could have one K through 12 and one higher ed reporter in an ideal world. There's so much we want to do, and there's so much demand for what we want to do. But even for where we are right now, I want to invite everyone tonight, if you're not yet a member of VTDigger, to please join us. We have a $14 a month membership, $1 for every county. And that is just such a wonderful way to support VTDigger because it's steady for us. We can count on it every month. We can plan ahead. And it shows when we're up for a national grant, the more Vermonters who are contributing, that helps them see there's a desire for this and it's a worthwhile investment for them. If you're in a position to make a major investment, say for a multimedia reporter, we have a program Dustin runs, and we have a number of different ways you can do that. He would be happy to speak with you. But in general, we just are so thankful for your readership, for your excellent questions tonight, and above all, your trust in us. So thank you. And thanks, Geeta and David.
Thanks everyone for coming. GNAT-TV for making everything happen tonight and supporting our work. The Manchester Community Library for everything they did. VTDigger staff, our board members here. Sky, David, Geeta. It's been amazing. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Oh, it's all put away.